Hi everybody, let's finish up our last part of lecture 2. Now this is going to be on the integumentary system. When we're talking about the integumentary system, what we're talking about is your skin, its associated glands, your nails, your external, what we call your cuticular linings. Okay, integumentary system consists of skin, accessory organs, hair, nails, what have you. It actually makes up a pretty large amount of your body, so about 7% of your body by weight and around 2 meters of surface area, so a large amount of surface area in reality. And the skin is quite variable as to its general thickness. You can imagine like the skin on your cheeks. You can feel that. The skin on the underside of your arm, it's quite thin. Your lips have quite thin skin versus like the skin on the top of your arm. Like the skin on your neck, you can pinch up the back, like on your back, on your shoulders. It's very, very thick skin. The skin on your palms and your soles of your feet is quite thick by comparison. So it's quite variable in its thickness, depending upon what is necessary by the body. Now, inspection of the skin, hair, nails, what have you, is a really important part of any general physical examination. So getting a physical. The idea is that, for instance, your nails are able to document certain mineral deficiencies. Examination of the colors seen there can help us understand things about the liver. Your skin can help us understand if you're having kidney issues, all sorts of things. So it's very important, a very important part of a general physical exam. The skin is also seen as quite a vulnerable organ. In fact, it's the most widely treated organ system for a human is the integumentary system. And there's a very simple reason for this. Your skin comes into contact with more things than do your other organ systems. Think about abrasion, so you scrape against something, needs treatment, getting cut open, skin, getting an infection, you name it. Our skin is quite vulnerable because it's exposed to all of these things, let alone radiation. So think about like ultraviolet radiation, sunburns and what have you, leading to skin cancer, very dangerous, certainly receives a lot of medical treatment. So again, the integumentary system, the study of, is referred to as dermatology. So you go see a dermatologist when you have a skin issue. All right, the functions of the integumentary system are quite varied. There's actually a lot going on here. Protection is going to be the first thing that comes to mind. So if I sat here and I said, hey, what does your skin do for you? The first thing you'd probably come up with is protection. But the idea is protection from what? Okay, your skin protects you from abrasion, so keeping you from hurting your underlying tissues by being thick and tough to the world around you. Your skin protects you from bacterial infections. Okay, your skin is a barrier network that keeps pathogens out of your system. Your skin protects you from UV radiation, so bright sunlight can damage your cells. Your skin has inset mechanisms to prevent that damage. Your skin is very important, okay, very important for these purposes. Melanin protecting us from sunlight. The skin secretions are antibacterial. Keratinization makes the skin very tough. You have macrophages and Langerhans cells. Langerhans cells are white blood cells that hang out just below the surface of your skin, in essence. Okay, kind of right below the very top. And they are going to be antibacterial in their activity. So if some sort of foreign pathogen tries to make its way into your skin, first thing that's going to come into contact here under the surface are these Langerhans cells that have all these feelers, and they're trying to seek out and destroy any foreign pathogens that are attempting to get into your system and cause you problems. So this is very important. All right, number 2, your skin has a metabolic function, and that function is the synthesis of vitamin D. If you get appropriate levels of sunlight, you're going to make lots of vitamin D over time. It's going to be very healthy for your system. Vitamin D is a steroid hormone. It's very important for your ability to take up calcium. No vitamin D, no calcium. Doesn't matter how much you consume in your food. You could be drinking milk all day long. You will not absorb any of that calcium without appropriate levels of vitamin D. Now, do we get enough sunlight to make appropriate levels of vitamin D these days? I'd say no. That's why if you go to Walmart, Publix, what have you, you look at the milk or the cheese or the OJ or what have you, what you're going to see is that they're all artificially enriched with vitamin D inset in the chemical already. Okay? So what that means is when you drink milk, you're not only getting the calcium, but you're also getting the vitamin D necessary for your intestinal tract to absorb that calcium. It's already there. In fact, in a lot of other states, like North Carolina is a good example of this, A pregnant woman will have vitamin D drops, basically, you put it in whatever you're eating, prescribed to them so that they can take up extra calcium, having plenty of vitamin D in their system, important for strong bones and developing skeletons. So vitamin D is incredibly important. Your skin's metabolic function, one of these is to help with the manufacture process of vitamin D. All right, sensation. Your skin has a variety of touch receptors. Key amongst these are Meissner's corpuscles and Pacinian corpuscles. Meissner's corpuscles and Pacinian corpuscles. These are touch receptors. I can close my eyes and I can feel of this clicker and I can tell you all about its general textures. I can hold this delicately because my skin tells me what I'm touching. The table is cold. Okay, these are the ways in which such things function. These corpuscles are important touch receptors. Excretion. Your skin has the ability to release all sorts of things that are produced by your body. Fluids, you can release a lot of fluid via sweat. Your sebaceous glands release a lot of oils. You even have the ability to release ureic compounds from your skin if at all necessary. So if you have a buildup of this stuff in your bloodstream, you'll actually start releasing it through the skin. This is a way of diagnosing kidney issues, actually. Body temperature regulation. If you get cold, you vasoconstrict the blood vessels going to the skin surface and limit your heat loss. If you're hot, you vasodilate the blood vessels going to your skin surface and it helps you liberate heat from the system. Your skin is very important for general temperature regulation. Not even to get on the subject of being very, very hot and sweating and evaporatively cooling yourself. I mean, you know, the system works. Now, not only all of these, which are very important, but also nonverbal communication. Okay, nonverbal communication. Here's my dog after me walking in the room, cutting the light on him, and not realizing he was there. He is clearly perturbed. He's pretty unhappy with me. And I can see that just by looking at him. Here he is incredibly happy. Same concept. I can tell he's incredibly happy just by looking at him, the way he's holding his facial features. People you know can walk up, look them in the eyes, you can tell how they feel, right? It's very simple. You can walk down the street, see people you don't know and have a good idea how they feel. Because of our skin's function in nonverbal communication. Now, how is this thing set up? We have three distinct regions that are worthy of our consideration. These are the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis. Let's go through and talk about them. Yeah, okay. The epidermis is the outer layer. This is the dead layer of skin, if you remember what I'm talking about. So the most exterior surface of your skin is very, very thick, very, very tough. This outer portion, all of this. It sort of grows mitotically from here, and then as it moves out, it dies, and you end up with a dead layer at the very exterior surface. Think about your epidermis as the shield. Okay, it is a shield which protects you from things being able to get into your system. So there's a very strong anti. All right, now let's talk about the layers of the integumentary system. First is the epidermis, seen here. Next is the dermis, seen here. All of this is dermis. And that is followed by the hypodermis. The hypodermis is the lowest layer. Now, the epidermis is this outer portion here. It is an epithelial lining, so the cells there are epithelial cells of various types. And it is considered non-vascularized. In other words, it has no blood flow. Now, remember, if it's an epithelial tissue, it is going to be non-vascular. It'll have no direct blood flow. So where does it get its nutrition? It gets its nutrition because it's supported by a connective tissue. Your dermis is made of connective tissue. It's going to provide structural support for the epidermis, and it's going to supply blood flow to the epidermis, goes in via diffusion and osmosis, moves into these lower cells and allows this tissue to grow. Now, your epidermis is important because the most exterior layer of the epidermis is actually dead cells, and they form a barrier which prevents other things from being able to get into your body. Think about like pathogenic bacteria as an example. Your skin is a wonderful barrier because this outer dead layer keeps stuff from getting in. I like to tell people that The epidermis is the shield. Okay, it's the shield which prevents other things from getting in. Now, the dermis. The dermis is kind of where all the magic happens. Your hair follicles grow in the dermis. You have erector pili muscles in the dermis. Your Meissner's and Pacinian corpuscles, your touch receptors are in the dermis. Your sweat glands and oil glands are in the dermis. Like all the magic's happening in the dermis. And the dermis is incredibly thick by comparison. Again, made out of connective tissue here. Basically, this gives skin its tensional rigidity. All right, so the skin is very strong. You pull against it, it's not going to go anywhere. A lot because the connective tissue is found in the dermis. And again, all this other stuff's in there as well. I like to talk about leather jackets here. So if you've ever seen a suede leather jacket, what suede leather is just the dermis of a cow. All right, and that's how this fits. Last but not least is the hypodermis, and the hypodermis is underlying fat. Okay, it forms a cushioning network for your skin. It helps to hold the skin down to underlying tissues. It forms an insulating barrier for heat. It works like a charm. So you have this underlying adipose tissue, this underlying fat, all over your body, and it does a variety of things for us, as I just outlined. All right, perfect. Let's go here. So the epidermis. So we went through and kind of talked about them a little bit. Let's go into a little bit more detail. In the epidermis, we see that there are two general types of skin that are worthy of our consideration. These are thick skin and thin skin. You can probably guess where you'd find these. Thick skin is found on the palms and soles of your body. Okay, palms of your hands, soles of your feet is where you find thick skin. And it's thick because the outer layer of the epidermis is really thick. Now, follow that over here. Over here, the outer layer of the epidermis is very, very thin. That makes this thin skin. Now, what I want to say is this. This epidermis, all right, this outer layer, the lower cells are alive. They are mitotically dividing. They're getting ample nutrition from the underlying connective tissue. Whoa, what is going on? There we go. They're getting ample nutrition from underlying connective tissue. You can see all these undulations. These are areas where capillaries form big balls up in the epidermis. So capillary beds from the dermis push up into the epidermis to feed this lower layer of mitotically active cells. But it's kind of like a desert. The further cells grow away from this lower layer, right? The further the cells grow away from their base, remember this is an epithelial lining, so it's polar, it's got a top and a bottom. The bottom is where the mitotically active cells are. The further they grow away, the less healthy they become. Eventually they get so far from nutrients and water that they begin to desiccate, they flatten out, and they die. We call this atrophy. They go through an atrophying process. And as they die, they solidify and then slowly flake off at the upper layer of your skin. So your skin is constantly growing from the bottom to the top, and then it flakes away at the top. The dust in this room, that dust is dead skin. Okay? That dust is dead skin. All right, what else do we want to say here? So basal layers, the layer of young keratin, highly mitotically active. Your skin has a very, very fast mitotic rate. Why would that be? Because if you damage yourself, you better be able to heal quickly so you don't get an infection. Let's talk about the granules that are found in skin. There are three types. There are melanin granules, keratinohyaline granules, and lamellated granules. Now, they are found in different places. Let's talk about melanin first. Melanin is made in the very lowest layer of the skin, and then it will do its job sort of here in the middle. Can you see all this brown? That's the production of melanin. Okay, that is the production of melanin. And as melanin is produced, it gets pushed up, pushed up, pushed up. It's shielding underlying cells from UV radiation. And then again, these cells eventually go through atrophy, they die, and they flake away. Lamellated granules and keratinohyaline granules are different. They only pop up in this central portion of the epidermis that is called the stratum granulosum. Okay, now pay attention. Melanin is made at the very bottom of the layers of skin, a layer called the stratum basale. It does its job kind of in the middle. Keratinohyaline and lamellated granules, they are right up here near the top, man. in a layer called the stratum granulosum. Like stratum means layer, granulosa means layer of granules. It's where you find keratinohyalin granules and lamellated granules. What do they do? Okay, keratinohyalin granules make everything above this very tough. Keratin is a protein that gives skin its strength. Keratinohyalin granules are releasing keratin that toughens the skin. So everything above this kind of darkish layer, which is the stratum granulosum, is really tough. And you contain lamellated granules here, and lamellated granules are a is it a glycolipid? I think it's just a lipid. Yeah, they're glycolipids. It's a lipid all the same. It's an oil in essence that coats the cells here and makes them quite waterproof. Okay? So the lamellated granules make everything above this waterproof. So that if you get immersed in fluid and water is trying to make its way into your skin from the outside, it can't do it because the cells are waterproof. In fact, you could go to your bathroom right now and drip water across your arm and give it a good shake, and you'll see that you're virtually dry because your skin is basically waterproof. Okay, it's basically waterproof. And that also means that nutrients from below can't get past that layer. So everything above it, those are dead cells. Okay, so what do we have to say here? We know that the outer layer of cells is dead. We know that nutrition is provided by underlying connective tissue. We understand the 3 types of granules found in the skin, and we kind of know where they're found. And that works for me. Yeah, that'll work for me. All right, let's talk about the dermis. So your dermis is made out of large amounts of connective tissue, and there's all sorts of things that are found in here as a result of this. Again, you've got your oil glands on your hair follicles, erector pili muscles that make your hair stand up. You've got your your eccrine sweat glands that produce sweat. We'll talk about this in a second. And importantly for this conversation, this is where you find the Meissner's corpuscles and the Pacinian corpuscles. Now, Meissner's corpuscles are found in these undulations. Remember, we talked about this previously. These undulations from the dermis up into the epidermis. This is where you'd find Meissner's corpuscles. And Meissner's corpuscles, as seen here, found in dermal papillae, form what we might call delicate touch sensors. Okay, gentle touch. We sense gentle touch using the Meissner's corpuscles. Whereas your Pacinian corpuscles are found much deeper. Okay, much deeper in the dermis. In fact, we have names for this. This upper part is called the papillary layer, and then the lower part is referred to as being the reticular layer. The Pacinian corpuscles are down deep in the reticular layer. And what they will do there is they act as deep touch sensors. So I can like grab this chair here and I can lift it up, and there's all this pressure on my fingertips. It helps me interpret the weight of that chair. Okay, deep touch. They are deep touch sensors. Perfect. Perfect. Meissner's corpuscles, delicate. Pacinian corpuscles, deep, high pressure, pain sensors in essence. And worthy of our consideration here, like I mentioned, this papillary layer that contains these dermal papillae. In some cases, they will line up in special ways, and they form what we call friction ridges. So this is somewhat driven by dermal papillae forming line. All right, we get the lines. These are referred to as being friction ridges. You might know them as fingerprints, and there's a reason they exist. It's not just so you can get caught if you rob a bank. These friction ridges help me to hold on to things so they don't easily slip out of my hands. Okay, so those are somewhat driven by dermal papillae, as you can see here, these undulations from the dermis up into the epidermis. All right, cleavage lines. Cleavage lines are pretty cool. What you have here is attachment points between the skin and the underlying musculature. All right, I can grab a hold of my skin and I can pull this way, and I can pull it up a little bit. You know, I can get my hands on there. But if I try to come at it from the other direction, I kind of struggle. All right, take your hand and try to pinch up the skin right in the middle of your palm. You can't really do it. Like, it's hard, because if you look, you can see these deep lines. These deep lines in my palm, and you have them too. What those deep lines are evidences, if you will, of the cleavage lines on our body. These are referred to as cleavage lines and flexure lines. We'll just call them cleavage lines for general purpose. What you see are bands of collagen, right? Bands of collagen, and where they align on the body to hold the skin down to the underlying musculature. This is important. This is why I can pinch the skin up here easy, but I can't really do it in the opposing direction. It's important that we realize how this works because it somewhat guides how we do surgery. You probably have seen somebody that's had neck surgery at some stage. Do they just come in straight and do neck surgery? No. What they do is they come in on a distinctive line. Okay, they cut across at an angle. The reason for this is that if you cut across at an angle, when you're done with that surgery, the wound will kind of self-heal. It'll self-seal, I should say, so it will heal very quickly. All right. If you cut across the cleavage lines and you damage the cleavage lines, every time you turn your head, those cleavage lines are going to be pulling against the wound, and it's going to take a longer time to heal, and you'll get way more scar tissue. So what we try to do when we're doing surgical procedures is we try to cut between the cleavage lines, not across them, and that helps us to heal more readily. Yeah, that's perfect. All right. You can't talk about the integumentary system without talking about the most obvious sign, the most obvious variation in humans, and that is skin color. Now, skin color is derived from 3 pigments. These 3 pigments are melanin, keratin, and hemoglobin. Okay, this is not keratin that gives skin its toughness. This is keratin, which is a pigment. Okay, now the reality is that melanin runs the show here. Melanin is what gives us all of our general skin coloration. Melanin is what gives our hair its color. Melanin gives your eyes its color. Melanin is very, very important here. It's certainly in charge. Now, melanin produces a pigment that's kind of brownish in color. You can actually see it in this slide. That is the production of melanin. You can see the brown coloration there. And back to here. Oh, hang on. Back to here. Now, fascinating. Melanin, the way it works is kind of cool. So melanin, again, shields us from UV radiation, which is important. Okay, we need to be shielded from UV radiation. But fascinatingly, though we all look a little bit different in terms of our skin's tone, we all have pretty much the same number of melanocytes. We're virtually identical in the number of melanocytes we have. It's just some of us have adapted to produce more melanin, and some of us have adaptations to produce less melanin, depending upon our deep life histories. And I'll be showing you that here in just a second. It's a really cool story. Oh, let me ask a question. If we all quit school right now, and we all just started a farm, and we worked outdoors all day long, number one, we'd have plenty of vitamin D. But number two, all of us, regardless of our skin tone, our skin would get darker, right? We would tan, we would get darker. And the reason for this is very simple. It's an adaptive process. If I go out in the sun, the sun hitting my skin surface, my body is going to realize that the UV radiation is damaging my underlying cells, so I will produce more melanin in an attempt to negate that. In the same way that you can go and you can work out, and your muscles are like, wow, he's doing a lot of exercise, we should get bigger and stronger. In the same way that if you pick up guitar and start playing guitar all the time, the tips of your fingers where you're having to do all the fret work will toughen, they will get calloused. All right, it's an adaptive process. It's an adaptive process. So we produce melanin in response to the sunlight that we take in. All right, perfect. Let's talk about the other 2 pigments real quick, and then we'll get into the details. So keratin. Keratin is not produced by the human body. It's accrued from your environment, specifically from certain vegetables. Carrots being very important amongst this. Keratin gives off kind of an orangish color pattern, if you will. And what keratin will do is it will store itself up in your stratum cornea, your outer layer of skin, the most exterior layer, and become visible in and of that function. If you look down here, we got 2 folks. One's a vegetarian. Can you guess which one? It's the person whose hands look almost jaundiced, almost yellow. That yellow is from eating a lot of plant materials that contain a lot of keratin, and it's accruing in the outer surface of that skin. So you can see it physically. There it is. Now, hemoglobin also plays a role here. Hemoglobin is a protein system, a quaternary protein found in your blood that carries oxygen. But your blood is flowing all through your body and all through your skin at any given moment. So, for instance, the reason that my skin looks almost pink here on my hand is because you're seeing light reflecting off the hemoglobin through my skin surface. Because me and my northern Scottish heritage, you can see these things. You can see light physically reflecting off of the red hemoglobin found there. So hemoglobin most certainly plays a role in your skin's coloration. Now, why? Why do we see variation in skin color? It's a wonderful question and an even better tale to tell. So let's talk about it. The evolution of skin color. You can look across the globe and you can see skin color follows a very predictable range. The idea is if you cross the equator, skin colors tend to be quite dark. And then the further you go toward the poles, skin colors tend to lighten up. Doesn't matter what continent or continent set you're on, it's the same story. Dark across the equator, lighter the further north or south you go. And the question becomes, why? Why is this? There's got to be a reason. Now, if I asked you, generally speaking, what is the function of melanin, which drives this? This is driven by melanin. What's the function of melanin? You would say protection. And if I said protection from what? You'd probably say the sun. And if I said, why do you need protection from the sun? You'd probably say, skin cancer? And I would say, no. Incorrect. All right? The reality is as follows. Skin cancer has no real influence over natural selection. Okay? There is no selective pressure for skin cancer. Because when people die from skin cancer, is later in life, 40s, 50s, 60s, or older, okay? People don't have any natural selective pressure from skin cancer. It's just the way that this works. So, is there something that sunlight, UV radiation, does to the human body during reproductive times, which is when this matters? You've already had kids by the time you'd have trouble with skin cancer. Is there something during reproductive times that sunlight is doing that melanin helps with? And the answer is, yes, there is. Let's talk about it. Two things. Where am I at? And here, I think. UV radiation has some adverse effects. The main thing here is that UV radiation breaks up folic acid. This is deleterious. This is bad. You want to know what folic acid's good for? Having healthy offspring. In fact, if you are pregnant or have been pregnant, you've probably taken prenatal vitamins before. And guess what prenatal vitamins are like full of? Folic acid. Because if you're taking prenatal vitamins, which contain a lot of folic acid, it dramatically decreases your risk of having major birth defects or problems during pregnancy, like preeclampsia or what have you. I think I got a list on here somewhere. Like, it's very important to have to have plenty of folic acid in your system while you are pregnant if you want to have a healthy child. So folic acid really matters to fecundity, to the ability to have healthy offspring. And if it's 50,000 years ago and you're hanging out in a place that's got lots and lots of sunlight, folic acid in your system is going to get busted up like it's going out of style, and your chance of having a healthy kid dramatically decreases. So what does your body do? What does your body do to help you deal with this sunlight that can cause problems for your unborn child? Well, start producing more melanin. And the more melanin you have, the more you can protect from that bright UV radiation, the more you can protect your folic acid storages, the more likely you are to have a healthy offspring. So when you look at the area of the planet where sunlight is most intense, again, sunlight coming in directly on a straight line to the equator means that more UV radiation gets through. You see a lot of melanin production. This melanin production is for a very simple process. It's to protect folic acid storages so that people there can have healthy, happy babies. It's adaptation. Very simple adaptation. By comparison, think about more towards polar regions. Because of the shape of the planet, light coming in towards the poles hits a thicker, angled atmosphere, and that's going to make light bounce off and go in other directions. Okay, so very little UV radiation, by comparison, is going to be coming in at these poles. So, are you concerned with busting up your folic acid storages if you're living way up in North America? And I mean North America, okay? Are you terribly concerned about your folic acid? Not really. There's not enough UV radiation coming in to bust it up to the levels that we're talking about. But what are you worried about? Vitamin D. See where we're going with this? If you're living along the equator, you're making all the vitamin D you need. Not a big deal. You're more worried about folic acid storages. But as you move up towards the poles, you're not getting as much sunlight, which means you're not making as much vitamin D. So what will happen is you'll produce less melanin in an attempt to make more vitamin D. You're not so worried about your folic acid storages, you're more worried about vitamin D. So, if you're living at an equatorial habitat, you're going to want to protect your folic acid. You're going to have all the vitamin D you want. You want to protect the folic acid, so you're going to have darker skin coloration. If you're living more towards the poles, you're going to be worried about not getting enough vitamin D. So you're going to have lighter colored skin so that you can make more vitamin D because you're not terribly worried about folic acid storages. Not enough light coming in to damage it anyway. So skin coloration is a trade-off between protecting our folic acid storages so that we can have healthy offspring and having enough vitamin D to absorb calcium, which leads to having the capacity to produce like a fetal skeleton, for example. Remember, you got to draw a line from this all the way back to the process of having high levels of fecundity, let's say, having healthy offspring. It's all driven back to having healthy offspring. That is what pushes the variation that we see amongst humans. And that's pretty cool, man. Pretty neat stuff. Let's talk a little bit about albinism. So albinism is a situation where a person is incapable of producing melanin, all right? And if you can't make melanin, you can run into some issues. Now, not least amongst these is these folks are going to be more apt to get sunburns. Your eyes actually contain huge amounts of melanin. It's very important for the way that we focus light. So people that are albino tend to have eyesight issues, eyesight-based issues. When we look at the world around us, there are animals which are in fact quite interesting and beautiful with their albinistic characteristics, but the chance of that squirrel surviving into adulthood and reproducing are very limited because in the wild that squirrel would be torn up by a hawk in a heartbeat. So to be albino is to not have the capacity for the production of melanin, and it can lead to a variety of issues all across the body and just be generally fascinating. It's a fascinating variation in human genetics. Okay, let's go here. Skin glands. All right, let's talk about the glands in your skin. You have a few different ones here to discuss. Let's do sebaceous glands and eccrine glands first. All right, sebaceous glands. Sebaceous glands produce sebum. Okay, it's basically an oily liquid. Sebaceous glands produce sebum, which is basically an oily liquid. There we go. All right. What this stuff does is it basically acts as a waterproofing agent and a lubricant for your hair. Believe it or not, these sebaceous glands are going to be attached only to hair follicles. You only see these where hair is actively growing, where hair is found, and they tend to go active around puberty. Sebaceous glands are kind of neat because not only do they contain a little bit of water and some oils, they also contain a lot of other things as well. And because of this, occasionally bacteria can get into them and cause you problems. Like if you have a pimple on your face, it's a sebaceous gland. Okay, by and large, it's a sebaceous gland. Like a whitehead is where you have a sebaceous gland that gets blocked and it keeps producing sebum and it forms like that little pustule, if you will. And then if bacteria get in there and start chowing down, that would cause an infection therein, and you could end up with, like a big swollen pustule. Okay, gotta love it. Sebaceous, or what we call oil glands, and these go active at puberty as well, which is why when we hit puberty, we tend to have breakouts and things. This is these glands kind of waking up. Now, interestingly, sebaceous glands are also bactericidal. It's a fancy way of saying they have an antibacterial characteristic. Okay, an antibacterial characteristic. Then we have sweat glands. These are going to be eccrine sweat glands. Eccrine sweat glands are all over the body. Now, sebaceous glands, what do I want to say? Let's keep this simple. Sebaceous glands are only found with hair follicles, as I said previously, which is kind of cool. Again, these are waterproofing. Think about your palms and soles. This is a little nuance to this. If you go swimming for a prolonged period of time, or you get in like a tub bath or anything along those lines, you may notice that your hands get pruny or your feet get pruny. It's because they're lacking hair. So you don't have hair on your palms or your soles. That's thick skin. Thick skin is devoid of hair follicles. And because it's devoid of hair follicles, it doesn't have sebaceous glands. And no sebaceous glands means no waterproofing effect. So you're more apt to absorb water to the skin there, which is why your hands and your feet get pruny when you're in water for a prolonged period of time. All right, now then, let's talk about eccrine glands. Eccrine glands are all over the body, man. You got millions and millions and millions of them. And they basically make water. Okay, they basically make water. This is going to be used for evaporative cooling. I mean, there can be a few other things in there, and they tend to be dermicidal. So they have an ability to kill bacteria and in some cases fungi. A lot of this is because the pH of your sweat's a little bit acidic. So by being acidic, it makes the environment on the outside of your skin very dangerous, if you will, for bacteria. Bacteria can't handle it. Okay, so you got this antibacterial chemicals in sebaceous glands. You have this dermicidal and low pH from your sweat glands. Basically, what this does is it makes for your skin to be a wonderful barrier, keeps bacteria from being able to set up shop. Yeah, that works. All right, so mostly water. We discussed its dermicidal effects and its pH. We know that this is going to be helping us to cool down when we're hot. Now then, let's talk about the elephant in the room a little bit. These are going to be apocrine glands. Aprocrine glands. Now, let me show this to you. Let me jump over to a slide that's got a skin on it. Here we go. So, sebaceous glands are attached to the hair follicles. They produce this oil that helps waterproof the skin. Aprocrine glands are found all over the place, but they just make water, basically. They produce a very watery substance. There's a few other things in there, like salt is a key example, but mostly just water, which helps us to evaporatively cool. Apocrine glands are different. They're still sweat glands, but they're different. Apocrine glands are found exclusively under your arms and between your legs, what we call anogenital regions and axial regions. Okay, and they go active only post-puberty. They're not active in youth. And apocrine glands contain a bunch of fats and weird proteins and things. It gives their substance, which they release, kind of a yellowy, sticky texture, if you will. And because they produce these fats and these proteins, that's like food for bacteria, man. Which is why, if you don't put on deodorant and you go and you work hard all day long, you might develop some body odor. Body odor is bacteria chowing down on the secretions of your apocrine glands. You don't produce an odor. You don't produce it. It's produced by the bacteria chowing down on the secretions of your apocrine glands. That's what body odor is. Yeah, that's good enough. So let's continue. Now, so these go active. They're very rare, only about 2,000. Only found in certain places. They produce weird fats and proteins. They are odorless. They only work at puberty. They also increase in their activity during the fertile phase of the female menstrual cycle, and they increase in activity during copulation, during sexual reproduction. The heck is going on here? Okay, what the heck is an apocrine gland? And the answer is perhaps more fascinating. We think these may be closet human scent glands. Okay, think about animals in the woods. How do they find each other? Like, how does a dog find another dog? They use scent. They can identify one another based off of scent. They can tell if reproduction is possible based off of scent. Like, if you go hunting, one of the ways that you can attract deer is by using specific chemicals in urine to bring these animals in because they think it's breeding season or something along those lines. We think that apocrine glands are closet scent glands, if you will, for humans. Now, do they work? Do we attract one another based off of scent? Well, you know, the jury's kind of out, but we can have a little bit of a conversation. Now, I trust that at some stage in your life, you've probably smelt someone else and thought they smelled nice. That is not what we're talking about here. This is going to be subconscious. There's a study, you should probably pause this and look it up when we're done. There was a study done years ago where they took a bunch of ladies and they put a white cotton mask on them and they had them go through and rate a bunch of pictures of dudes from, I think it's like 0 to 10, basically kind of like swipe left, swipe right, but you get my point. Rate them in terms of their general attractiveness. So they're wearing a mask not unlike this, okay? Unbeknownst to them, half of the people in the study, their masks had been treated with a compound called, I think it was androstenedione. In essence, it's a masculinity hormone. In essence. Thought of as being able to go aerosol. And the ladies that looked at the pictures that had regular masks with nothing on them were were not terribly impressed by the pictures they saw. Whereas the ladies that had masks that were treated with this chemical were much nicer in the rating system, okay? So do we utilize scent in order to attract one another? I don't know. Is there some fascinating evidence out there that we do? There is. And it's well worth your time. You should check it out. That would explain why this goes active post-puberty. That would explain why this is more active during certain times of the year. It's pretty impressive. Neat stuff. All right, let's go here. Nails and hair. Let's do nails first. So I'm not terribly concerned with this. I do want you to know that your nails and your hair are virtually identical to the rest of your skin. Okay, it's almost the same as the rest of your skin in reality. Hang on. All right, your nails and your hair are virtually identical to the rest of your skin. You can think of like your nail as being just a big wide hair, and you can think of your hair as being very thin nails. Okay, they're virtually identical, and if you take a piece of skin and a piece of nail and a piece of hair and you burn it in a mass spectrometer, they give the same spectrum. Okay, they're virtually identical. The only nuance to this is that the keratin found in your nails and your hair is of a slightly different formula. The structuring is different, making it very tough, making the cells here really stack up firmly together and have structural rigidity as one. Again, which makes your nails and your hair a little bit tougher than the rest of your skin, but otherwise it's identical. What I would like for you to know is that your nails are basically a tool and that they grow in the same fashion as the rest of your skin grows. All right, there will be a lower layer where there is mitotically active cells. Those cells will grow away from that mitotic layer where they will dry out, they will desiccate, they will die and form the hardened nail that we think of. Okay, it's not unlike your regular skin. It's an atrophy process. And it's the same story with hair. Hair has a mitotically active region, and then it grows up and away from that mitotically active region. The cells there begin to dry out and they die, and by the time it emerges from your skin, it's like a dead, dry layer of stuff, okay? Just like a nail, but round, or generally speaking, round. Same concept, which is why if you ever get a hold of a hair and pluck that sucker out, you may look at the bottom and see it has like an enlarged area at the base. We refer to this as being the hair bulb. The bulb is larger because the cells there are still alive, which means that they are enlarged, full of fluid, and mitotically active. Okay, so the deeper you go, the bigger the hair gets because the cells there are still alive. And as they move towards the surface of the skin, it'll get thinner and thinner and thinner because the cells are drying out. Okay, yeah, that works. Works like a charm. All right, just kind of for kicks and giggles, why do we have hair? One major reason for this is to protect us from UV radiation. Okay, some of the more exposed areas of our bodies must have this to protect us from UV. And also your hair forms a wonderful sensory network. Like, how do I know if a bug's crawling on my arm? I can feel it because the hair on my skin surface is highly innervated. Okay, yeah, that works. So nails are a tool. Your hair has some dual functionality. Takes us here to burns. Now, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about burns. I will point out what they mean. A first-degree burn is when just the epidermis is damaged. Good old-fashioned sunburn is typically a first-degree burn. It's going to heal pretty fast because the underlying layers of the skin are still there, so they're just going to reproduce the area that flakes away, and you're going to be totally fine. Not a big deal. First-degree burns are not that big of a deal. Second-degree burns is when the epidermis is damaged, but the upper layers of the dermis are also damaged. What that means is you don't have anything to grow back from. Okay, the dermis is still there, so that the epidermis will reinvade slowly, but this takes time. Okay, you got to regrow the epidermis over top of the dermis, and then get back to having functioning skin the way that we think of it. A third-degree burn is when you're burning all the way through the dermis of the skin. If you get all the way through the dermis of the skin, that means that you're all the way down to the hypodermic fat in some cases. You're going to have to regrow the damaged areas of the dermis. You're going to have to regrow the damaged areas of the epidermis. And that takes a lot of time. During that time, you're going to be wicking away a lot of moisture. That's why burns weep fluid. It's because fluid in the body is leaking out. The skin is supposed to be keeping it in, but it can't because it's not there. In fact, when people die from burns, they don't die from the burn. They tend to die from hypotensive shock. They lose so much fluid that the blood gets too thick and the heart doesn't pump it correctly. You can have a stroke or what have you. It's terrible, man. Terrible, terrible, terrible stuff. What's next? What am I saying here? Oh, and it dramatically increases the risk of infection. Third-degree burns take a long time to heal, so with that open wound there for prolonged periods, the chance of invasion from it's like staph or something like that getting into a burn is really elevated, which is why we work so hard to keep those wounds clean and closed. All right. I would invite you to pause this and go and look up xenografts, xeno skin grafts for burn victims. I think you'll be surprised with what you see. All right, it's not done as much here in the U.S., but in other countries. Here, I believe we mostly use, when we have somebody that's got like a third-degree burn on their arm, we'll wrap it in a special growth medium that's basically collagen fiber. So we wrap the area in collagen fiber, and it's got hormonal networks there that sort of encourage growth and keep out bacteria. So we have ways of dealing with these burns these days. All right, and last but not least, let's talk about different types of skin cancer. These are basal cell carcinomas, squamous cell carcinomas, and melanomas. Okay, first things first, a couple of terms. Benign means it's not going to hurt you, it's not cancerous. And to metastasize means to spread. Okay, it means to spread. Basal cell carcinomas, they tend to be pretty benign. Okay, these things may grow large and get unsightly. What will happen is you'll get like a swollen area and it'll get a divot. It's kind of bloody in the middle. They're very common, make up the vast majority of cases are these basal cell carcinomas. They can be all over the body. If you've ever heard like grandma say, I gotta go get a cancer cut off, or skin cancer cut off, that's what they're talking about, are these basal cell carcinomas. A good friend of mine, super cool dude, he grew up in the 70s in Florida, and he said they never even thought about sunlight, man. Never even worried about it. They just go and bake all day long. And he would come to work about every 2 weeks with a Band-Aid somewhere because he was having basal cell carcinomas cut off. Can be unsightly, they can hurt, they don't tend to be a huge problem. We tend to just go in and chop them out, throw a Band-Aid on it, and call it a day. That is a basal cell carcinoma. Get it checked out, but the world's not ending. Squamous cell carcinomas are dangerous. Okay, these do metastasize, they have the capacity to spread. What will happen is you'll get like an enlarged, dry skin-like area, and it can have all sorts of undulations in terms of color. It can bleed. Not a fun experience, I am told. What will happen here is these tend to be mostly on like the lip is where I hear these almost exclusively. Nose as well, I believe. I have nose on here. Ears, lower lip, and hands. I've seen them on the hands and lips. I haven't seen a lot of ears, but I have seen a nose as well. What we tend to do is we tend to remove them. We go in and we chop them out, and then we use radiation or what have you to try to clean up any other cells that may be problematic. Not the end of the world, but something you got to get taken care of pretty quickly. Okay, this is important to get taken care of quickly. Melanomas are a dramatic emergency. Okay, a melanoma spreads very quickly. They pop up out of nowhere and they move fast. This is an aggressive cancer. Okay, very aggressive cancer of the melanocytes. What tends to happen here is they get very, very dark very, very quickly, and we use what's called the ABCD rule to diagnose these. As you can see up top here, asymmetry, it is non-symmetrical. Like one side looks different from the other side. There will be border irregularities, like ins and outs, all sorts of things happening. The color is dramatically different from the rest of the skin's coloration, and then diameter. If it's bigger than the end of a pencil eraser, it's perhaps something you need to have checked on. With melanomas, we go in, we cut that sucker out like a big excision, take out as much as we can, and then you're getting either radiation or chemo to get rid of whatever's left. This is very dangerous, a very, very dangerous type of cancer. Basically, what I want from you is a knowledge of what these look like and how to kind of pick out what's what. Because I think it's important for you going forward that you be able to do this just so you can take care of yourself and the people around you. So yeah, that's what I have for you. And that's going to be the end of our little integumentary system chapter. Short and sweet, to the point. All right, have a good day, guys.